Hey everybody, Mike here. Welcome to episode 59 of the Around the Crease podcast. This week we're doing some highlights from around the nation. We're talking about some players of the week, some players who impressed, and of course we're going to talk to Michael about his travels around the Midwest. This week we're also going to be talking about this proposed NCAA legislation that would move the contact window from September 1st of a player's junior year to June 15th, just after their sophomore year. And Michael and I, we have different opinions on this, even though we kind of might be on the same side of the argument. It's a very complex argument, and you're going to want to listen to it. We're getting into the show right now. All right, well, we're back with another week of the Around the Crease podcast. Of course, my co-host, Michael Ward, is here with me. Michael, welcome back to another week.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
All right, so this week we don't have a guest this week, so it's just me and you. We got to fill 45 minutes to an hour, which certainly shouldn't be a problem. So everybody should just buckle in and get ready, because this week we're gonna do something not different, but we're gonna kind of go region by region or story by story. There was a few things over the past week that have just kind of caught my eye and caught your eye, and obviously you traveled a lot in the past couple weeks. So we're going to kind of hit some of the highlights of the stories from around the nation, and then we're going to, at the end, kind of talk about this, I guess, proposed rule change by the NCAA that could have an impact on the lacrosse rule, which really I don't even think has been instituted for a year. So we're going to get into that a little bit later, but first kind of want to start off with just, I know you're the Midwest guy, but I want to start with just kind of throw a big shout out to Cade Newton from South Elgin for, one, he was my player of the week last week, depending on when you're listening to this, for week 5 of the season, but he also reached 300 career points, which is one of those stuff. Obviously, once you start to hit 300, I think you start to kind of reach a different level as far as scoring. Like, you have to be very consistent, but it also, like, when you start to get at 300, 400 career points, like, you pretty much have to play from your freshman year. Like, it's hard to get there in just, like, 1 or 2 years, even though there's a couple kids that have reached close to 300 after 2 years, but it doesn't happen very often. But, so, and going to just kind of throw him a nice shout-out, because it was very interesting to talk to him, because mostly, like, he had a pretty good freshman year, scored 93 points, and then when they won the D2 state title in, let me not forget the year now, 2017, he blew up for 140 points. And then last year he kind of stepped back a little bit. He had 42, and like when I was talking to him, it was interesting. He said he had no idea he was getting close to 300 points. It ended up being his dad to tell him, like, I think the game before he actually ended up getting the record. So it was one of those, like, it was interesting to talk to him, because obviously a very humble kid and very appreciative, and as a lot of the kids do, credit a lot of his teammates. So I just wanted to throw a quick shout out to him to kind of get it started, because I think it's one thing I want to do more this season is to kind of let people know, like, who the player of the week was each week, and kind of why we ended up choosing guys like that, because it's always like, I try to project on some of the players through the end of the season why I might not name them player of the week for early in the year, because I'm like, well, they're going to do something later in the year. They played this series of games, and there's kind of some expectations on them performing well. But also, like, to kind of give the Mid-Atlantic roundup is another kid out of Virginia, Danny McMinn out of Briar Woods. He just became the program's all-time leading scorer last week, and I don't know if anybody, like, I don't know how familiar you are with Briar Woods, Michael, but they're a pretty solid program, year in, year out, very consistent, and have had some pretty good players in their history. But McMinn just he's top 25 all-time in Virginia, which Virginia has a pretty good history of lacrosse, just in general. And I don't know how familiar most people were, like, when you think of Virginia, like, a lot of the schools are kind of in the, basically, say, D.C. area, the Alexandria, Northern Virginia area, is a lot of where probably the teams that end up ranked, St. Stephen, St. Agnes, Paul VI, who we had Coach Waters on last week, those kind of programs are kind of up near that area. And then you kind of get St. Anne's Belfield, which is kind of the Charlottesville area, which obviously anybody familiar with college lacrosse will know where Charlottesville is. So it's kind of that area. But then you also get Richmond, which is kind of in that center of the state. So the state is big. And
yes, I love the state.
It's very
cool. It's
separated.
Like 3 states.
It really is. And I mean, then you got West Virginia, which is literally its own entire state.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a pretty massive state. So, like, it's interesting because you don't get all the teams that play each other. Really, in the private schools, the state does a pretty good job because they have basically a private school league, and then they have just the regular public school championship. So all the public schools, and they separate the private into D1, D2, and then public school, I think they have I think it's 4 or 5 classifications now. 6A being their biggest, which is obviously the biggest schools. And then, but it's interesting because schools like St. Stephen, St. Agnes, and Paul VI, they're private schools. St. Stephen's and St. Agnes plays in the IAC with Landon's and Georgetown Preps. Paul VI plays in the WCAC with Gonzaga and St. John's and schools like those. But then they also play in the VISAA championship, and it's a pretty brutal tournament because I think it's the WCAC championship is usually on like a Monday night, and then the VISA tournament literally starts like the day after or 2 days after. So like a team like Paul VI can play in a championship game in the WCAC, and they literally have to turn back around and start a completely new tournament 2 days later. So I didn't mean to give the Virginia history lesson in the middle of this, but always one of those things like it's a unique state, and that they divide it and they classify it in the way it's kind of laid out. Plus, you get schools that aren't really in they don't play each other until they kind of get in that private school playoff system, because that's a lot of the schools you end up seeing ranked among the top 25 in the region rankings and stuff like that are those private schools. But back to Danny, he ends up with the previous program record was 234 points held by Cole Pearsall, which is a class of 2017. So Cole didn't get to hold the record for too long before Danny broke it. But like I was talking to his coach, and they still have 10 regular season games left, plus potential playoff run for them as well, which they should make a pretty decent run in the playoffs as well. So he's another player. He's probably got a shot at 300 points this season. So good luck to Danny and Briar Woods. And one final shout out, because this literally happened just before we started recording, was Garrett, and I'm going to say Munich, and I'm going to apologize because apparently you can't even pronounce his last name into Google and it doesn't come up, which really surprised me. So we're going with Garrett Munich. So if you're listening, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name, but he's from Starrs Mill in Georgia, and he just passed 600 career faceoff wins, and he's just a junior. So he's another kid that, Starrs Mill has been a program kind of on the rise. I think they're a relatively new program, but they've been steadily climbing year in, year out. And I forget who they beat off the top of my head last year, but they had a pretty big win out of Georgia last year. So I think they're probably a program that, I don't, it's hard to be challenged the Lambert and Westminsters, because they have so much history behind them at this point. And obviously Lovett and Lassiter and Centennial, and there's so many programs that have a history down there, but they seem to be a team that is steadily on the rise and definitely could be kind of competing for that level of recognition at some point. Don't know if that's this year. It's one of those things as you win a title and then people start talking to you, start talking about you a lot more. You gotta get over that hump a little bit. So that's kind of the tour of the Mid-Atlantic and a little bit of the Southeast, I guess, as well. So obviously there's a lot more, and anybody who is reading laxrecords.com, we have all the region kind of breakouts in a national notebook. So if you want to read more of this stuff, you can go to laxrecords.com, and most of this is in there from last week, and then we'll have a new one each week. I do a national notebook in Mid-Atlantic on Mondays, and Michael, who we'll hear from next, does the Midwest. So it's about as good of a segue as I can do. And I know you've been I guess you said you weren't quite as busy last week as you wanted to be.
Last week wasn't as busy. But here, I want to shout, I want to point something out that you pointed out. I don't know if it was in a bowl. I don't know when things passed quickly. West Islip, because West Islip is very important in my house. Yes. My wife is from West Islip. That's where I got my love of lacrosse. Yeah. With Tommy Corcoran.
Yep.
As the new coach.
Getting
the first victory in how many years without Coach Craig?
Oh, I can't. It's 34. I'm getting confused because there's a few New York coaches like Mike Masser. He's new. Then Kurt Veniquattro out of Carthage. Right. He stepped down. There was a lot of coaches out in New York that finished their careers last year, and I can't. It's hard to keep how many years each of those guys were at each of those schools.
I will say this: my wife graduated from West Islip. She's going to kill me for her age, but that's what it is. In 1988, he was the coach then.
Yeah, I want to say 34 years. He was there for a while. Obviously, legendary coach.
He coached my son, so that's and Tommy Corcoran actually coached my son.
Yeah.
So So I just wanted to give that shout out, make sure that West Islip's getting, because I think they just got overlooked a little bit in the Inside Lacrosse article, talking about Ward Melville saying, "Oh, they're the new West Islip." So if you saw that,
yeah,
out there taking. So I just wanted to give a little.
There's a lot of competition in New York in that area. Like there's a lot of not even good programs. There's a lot of great programs. There's programs that don't make championship, like they don't get off the island championship that could probably win a state title in a lot of other areas of the country. I mean,
I'll say most of the other areas.
Yeah,
I'd venture a guess and say 42 states.
I mean, there's
that I could almost say I guarantee they'd win.
Yeah, I mean, you got
they can compete anywhere, but 42 states, these teams are. They're awesome.
Yeah,
it's a different world to watch them play.
Yeah,
and like Baltimore, it's a different world.
Yeah, definitely a different world. So, but anyway, we'll definitely throw the congratulations to Coach Corkin on his first win. And actually, while we're in New York for a second, the West Genesee new head coach, Coach Smith, just got his first win after, and I forget how many years in the series, 43 or 47. Like he was literally the only coach in that program's history. And it's almost weird. Like I'm going to have something in tomorrow's notebook that basically like Syracuse.com did a really good like behind the scenes of their first practice. Because this one is like, how many times are you going to get to cover a program that's got a first head coach in like almost 50 years? Like that's crazy.
It's
like,
insane. And for those people who don't know West Genesee, it's the West Jenny drill. The drill that every team uses. Okay, we're going to do the West Jenny drill.
Yeah.
It's based on that school. I mean, you're big when a drill is named after you.
Yeah.
So that's how big that school is, and the change that was made there. So I think that goes in part with the world of lacrosse is changing a little bit. You're seeing these old guard leaving. You're seeing new young people coming in New York. You're seeing the states pick up in other places.
Yeah.
I think this is a sea change that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I mean, as we've talked before, it's always interesting when you see we're not even talking about like decent coaches coming. These are legendary coaches in their respective states, and I'm like, how's the program gonna react? Like, it's worked for so long. Like it's probably not as much of an impact for the kids because there's West Genesee. I'm sure the talent level in that school is not going down, but coaching counts for so much in high school.
Yep.
And so many coaches I've read interviews on like things have changed when a lot of these guys started their coaching career. So can the new young crop of guys, like, what is their coaching like? They're coming into a different world nowadays.
A way different
than when Mike Massera when he started his coaching career, when Coach Craig started his coaching career, when Ambrose started his coaching career. Like it's a different universe now. Like they're playing with different rules.
I can't imagine a parent walking up to any of those coaches and saying, "Why isn't my kid playing?" I'm thinking, and I'm laughing to myself because of things I've seen with parents, and I'm thinking that wouldn't have worked with that coach.
Yeah.
Like, that would be very stupid to do.
Yeah.
And that's the changing of what's going on. You're seeing a lot of parents or, players say, I need to play more, and it's a different world.
Yeah.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Well,
I mean, you saw the reaction of most people when Coach Izzo yelled at that guy last week in the tournament, and it was one of those things, and you're like, people were up in arms and calling for him to be fired and all this stuff, and you're just kind of looking at him like, and he's like, kid wouldn't get back on defense. Like, I'm like, we've become a little sensitive. Like, you can get, like, you know what? Like, I've had a boss chew me out before. If I earned it, then okay, and you either get better or you don't, and then like, well, whatever happens after that, that's you had your chance. I'm like, I guess I've had my sharing of being chewed out, and you adapt and move on, or you just find something else to do with your life. And I'm like,
exactly.
You know what? It's like, you worked in a different world too, so like, I'm sure your bosses weren't all like gentle and be like, oh, you should, maybe you could do a little bit better tomorrow. I'm sure those conversations were different.
In most of my worlds, I was the boss, and I was not quiet and polite. I could never be a boss again.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. It's not, because I'm way too demanding, and it just doesn't seem to go over well
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. We're gonna get back to the Midwest.
Let's get back to the Midwest.
So what's happened? And obviously, as we're recording this like Thursday night, you've already been to a few places. Actually, I don't even know if you spent a night at home this week. To be honest,
I did. Yeah, you know what? Well, so I'm trying to think. It is Thursday. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out. So Wednesday I was in. So okay, I got to go back to.
You got
seriously. The days all blend together. I started the weekend in Michigan at Carmel, Forest Hill Central.
Mm-hmm.
That was on Saturday.
Yeah.
So on Saturday was Forest Hill Central, which is in Michigan, which is the runner-up in Division II in Michigan. They are loaded. They're low. It's a loaded team. They have a ton of talent. So it was there, or I was looking at going to see Brother Rice versus St. Ignatius.
Yeah.
Of Cleveland. So again, using Twitter, using this wonderful thing that for a 50-year-old guy like me, all of a sudden I'm on social media. I put which game should I go to, and the Carmel Forest Hills game got the most votes.
Yeah.
So I went there. Now, coincidentally, I live in Carmel, so I knew pretty much all the players.
Yeah.
And and I knew a bunch of parents from Forest Hills. So got in the car, went up there. Cold day, but game started off. Now I knew it would probably get a little chippy.
Yeah.
They played last year. A lot of kids know each other because a lot of kids play travel ball together. So there might have been a little talking, a little gamesmanship, but it started out and it was a back and forth game. Wasn't the cleanest, wasn't the sharpest game. I think Forest Hills was coming off a game a couple days ago. Carmel played the night before. The overreaching thing that I've noticed in this week is teams aren't so sharp. It's early still.
Yeah,
like Michigan just started.
Yeah.
So and I think it was Carmel's fourth game, but one of those games was against Culver. So I mean that's just
right.
Like taking abuse. So it was a good game. Started off good. And then Tate Halleck, who is an All-American, midi from Forest Hill Central. He is going to Michigan State as a football player.
Mm-hmm.
So he's pretty athletic. I think
that tells you about all you need to know.
I think his two brothers or brother or father or uncle, they've all played football at Michigan State. It's a Michigan State family.
Yeah.
He sort of took over. Now, that's not to take away anything from Jackson Clay, who's Bryce Clay's brother.
Yeah.
Who, as you've mentioned before, he might be one of the top freshmen in the country at Michigan.
Yeah.
He's lightning fast. Well, his brother's like the same way.
Okay.
So he was dishing, dashing, running through people. It was a nice game. And then Tate Halleck scores 5 goals in the first half.
Yeah.
Let's say it devolved after there. It got chippy. It got ugly. But I like, it wasn't anything where I was like, clutching my pearls. I was just like, this is what happens. These are two tough teams fighting.
Right.
In the end, Carmel lost 19-10. Which is a big score. I mean, this isn't like a pushover. Like Carmel's no pushover.
Right.
I mean, they're gonna beat up on some people.
Yeah.
For that score was an eye opener because I've put Forest Hills in my personal ranking.
Yeah.
Forest Hills is the top 3 school in Michigan.
Yeah.
Regardless, up until that point, I was saying it could be Brother Rice, it could be Detroit Catholic Central, it could be Forest Hills, maybe East Grand Rapids, Rockford, whatever. But it was those 3. At the same time, when I was watching Carmel, Brother Rice was throttling St. Ignatius of Cleveland, who was the state runner-up there last year, who some people thought would be the best team in Ohio this year.
Yeah.
Brother Rice beat them 18-8, and that was their first game.
Yeah, that was a big score.
Big score. So now I have to sit there and think, okay, is Brother Rice that good? Is St. Ignatius having a down year? These are all the things when you have interstate play and you talk to teams and you talk to coaches and you talk to players and you hear this and that. So that brings me to my next game, which in the Midwest, it's probably one of the biggest games you could see.
Yeah.
Brother Rice Detroit Catholic Central. There are a few heavyweight games. Loyola New Trier, Brother Rice, Catholic Central. Depending on where you are in Ohio, there's they could have 4 different big ones each year. It might change. I think there's going to be. Moeller, Xavier's a big one. I think the state championship big one. But when you think the big ones, New Trier, Loyola, Brother Rice, Catholic Central.
Yeah.
So I went there. Now, for people who don't know, Brother Rice has won 14 state championships in a row. They've won 24 out of the last 26. Last year, they did not win the state championship.
Yeah,
they lost.
That 14 was before last year.
Right, before last year. So coming into this game, Detroit Catholic Central was the defending champion. Brother Rice was the runner-up this year.
Yeah.
So that added to the storyline. Now, I kept thinking back, was the 18-8 over St. Ignatius, was that a statement? Were they coming out letting everyone know?
Right.
Well, I can say now I think it was a statement because Brother Rice came out, and it's not like Catholic Central is loaded too. I mean, that field was loaded with college players. Yeah. I mean, loaded. But it just seemed like it looked like a boys and men's situation. It just seemed like, I don't know if it became the perception. It just seemed like the Brother Rice people were bigger and faster and just got to everything. Yeah. Now, mind you, the Catholic Central goalie, Johnny Shea, made 15 saves.
Yeah.
He only played for the third quarter.
Yeah.
Brother Rice scored 16 goals. He made 15 saves. He made 4 saves in the first 3 minutes.
Yeah. Wow. That's
like, and not just like, this is a piece of, bubble gum getting thrown at you. Low to high missiles, high to low. Like I was writing down in the first 3 minutes, this kid's the player of the game.
Yeah.
I'm like, but then it just kept coming. It just kept coming, and they finally broke it down. Justin Glad, who he is going D1. I forgot where I left all my notes in the press box up there because it did get really cold. He's a Division I player. He scored 6 goals.
Yeah.
He's a beast.
Yeah.
I worry what they're going to do to other teams. If they play like that, I mean, I don't know if they're always going to be, but I'm sure Coach Chala will keep them that fired up.
Yeah.
But it as I said to the Catholic Central guys, I said, it's one game. You're the defending champs,
And I always wonder, like, I always think about, granted, I grew up an NC State fan, so, like, I'm kind of used to trying to rationalize early season losses. But, odds are those two teams, they have a shot at meeting again. And I've always wondered, like, is it better to have lost that early game? Because then it's like, you're like, oh, you've been exposed, you know what to work on. Like, because I remember talking with the St. Anthony's coach years and years ago, because St. Anthony's and Chaminade out of Long Island, they basically go back and forth with the Catholic League Championship every year. And I think there was a run where St. Anthony's would always get Chaminade in the regular season, and then they would lose in the championship game. I remember asking the coach, and he was like, sometimes you just wish you'd lose that first game. He's like, because you'd rather lose that one than the one that counts for it all. And he's like, and you learn a lot from the loss. He's like, and you get a little bit, he's like, you might get a little too cocky from the win and be like, we got them. So like a win like that, you almost wonder, is like, granted, I think, as we've talked before, Brother Rice might be playing a little pissed off. So,
they were. And by no means do I want to say they were playing with purpose. They weren't playing pissed off, because maybe 3 penalties. Yeah. I don't think it was dirty at all.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to imply dirty.
Right. But people might assume when you're saying pissed off. Oh yeah, they came out with a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, and I guess clarifying, they like, won the game. Was in,
right.
They didn't win the title last year, and that's a legacy. That's not that team. That is a legacy. That
right. Right. So it was impressive. It was an impressive game, and they could meet 2 more times. So they could meet for the Catholic League Championship and then the state championship.
Yeah.
And everyone sitting there talking about it was saying, do you win the first one or lose the next 2? How does it work? You have to rationalize it.
Right.
my take on it was you go home, you forget it. I mean, what's the difference if you get beat by 10, beat by 2, beat by 1, you're still losing.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's what you say when you lose. When you win, you sit there and go, we kicked their butt, whatever. So I can see both sides. The good news is for Catholic Central, they had a game to play yesterday.
Yeah.
So to go and, that's the best remedy. Go back out. So now I wanted to see how they rebounded. I wasn't at the game, but I was getting updates. And they beat East Grand Rapids, who is the Division II state champion.
Yeah.
They beat them 12-3.
Yeah.
So
pretty good rebound.
And his brother Rice that good.
Yeah.
So and I think they are. I mean, I really looked at him and it's early in the season. But when you see something like that, I looked and I said, I don't see a team right now that could beat them in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big thing. I mean, we'll find out.
And so everybody knows, if you haven't listened to the previous podcast, we are kind of taking Culver Academy Prep out of the equation. Right. Like they're like, because I'm sure there's probably someone screaming at the thing, like, but we're taking them out of the equation. We're not,
If someone's screaming at their podcast listening to this, they haven't listened before because they know my stance on Culver. Although Culver lost, let's just to let people know that.
We're gonna save that because I got an East Coast trip, so we're gonna save that a little bit.
So then the next day, yesterday, so I stayed over in Detroit, got up, drove home, changed my clothes, got in the car, drove to Cincinnati for St. X, defending champion of Ohio, to take on New Trier, the runner-up in Illinois. Now, New Trier, always a powerhouse.
Right.
It's almost like New Trier Loyola switch off every year.
Yeah.
And the weird thing about that one is, for the last few years, whoever's won in the regular season lost in the championship.
Yeah.
So going back to the game before, I sort of asked coaches and players, I said, for the Brother Rice DCC game, thinking the same thing. I go, do you show your whole hand in this game anymore?
Yeah.
Do you put all your packages in? And they're like, oh, we play. They're like, rest assured, you're going to see a game.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah.
So back to yesterday at Cincinnati, going to see St. X and New Trier. New Trier is a strong team, return a lot of great players. St. X, from what the experts say in Ohio, might be having a down year, or they might be a little younger. They lost some great players. I will say this: I watched that game. They don't look down to me. Again, the first half was sloppy. There were poor shot selections. Yeah. Let's just say that. Both coaches said after the game, there were some poor. Now, if these shots went in, these would have been like, these are the greatest shooters of all time. I mean, they were tough. But that was another back and forth game. And in the second half, New Trier seemed to gel a little better.
Yeah.
Even though they still took some crazy shots, they gelled. They have some nice players. They have a very talented freshman who possibly could have had 3 goals yesterday, Johnny Hackett. He went end to end, swim dodges, roll dodging. He's a freshman. He's so fast, but he just took that one extra step and didn't get it was like he did everything except finish.
Right.
But that's a kid to watch out for. His brother's, and the other thing, his brother's on Loyola Academy.
Yeah.
So that's New Trier Loyola.
That's going to be interesting.
2 brothers, right.
Yeah.
But then the player of the game was Henry Scherb from New Trier, 3 goals. Powerful shooter. I mean, just powerful shooter. I mean, you just see it there were a few times he shot high a few times. He could have had 6.
Yeah.
I don't think he misses those shots tomorrow. I think it was just, it was that thing, but
yeah,
I don't know how he got that open. But again, a strong game from both teams. It didn't answer a question for me. It didn't say, oh, St. X isn't good. It was, if that game went on 5 more minutes, could have been anyone.
Yeah.
That was the kind of game. It was a 9-7 game.
And a lot of these games, like when you get these early season games, especially between teams that, they're not going to play each other again. Like you kind of have to because obviously we're looking at it like, oh, in this vacuum at this moment. But then usually by the time the season plays out, then you really start to know, because if St. Xavier goes on and wins the Ohio State Championship, then you know, like, all right. But and if vice versa, if St. Xavier ends up with 2 wins on the season, then you know a little bit more as well. So it's always one of those, like, a lot of times in these early season, like, it's early for us as reporters too. It's like, because when it's like, you don't want to jump on the bandwagon too early and be like, oh my God, this is the greatest team you're ever going to see.
No, that's why
because you don't know at this point.
Right, because New Trier could win the Illinois State Championship, St. X could win the Ohio State Championship.
Yeah,
DCC could win the Michigan State Championship. They did it last year.
Yeah,
but the only team that I've seen this year so far, and I've seen 12 teams this year. And the only team, and again, let's throw Culver Prep out of this because it was like a machine, and I've seen them 3 times. Brother Rice was the only team saying, okay, that team, okay, that's a scary team. Like, that's the team where I said, that's scary. Yeah. That's a scary team. Yeah. The other ones I've said, I can see the talent. I can see the mistakes. I can see this. I want to see them with a little more seasoning. Yeah. Which we'll have. So now my next 4 games, it's like I'm stalking New Trier. Yeah. But I like to have the interstate games. Yeah. Because it shows you how one compares to the other. And then when I see them play their rivals at home, I can sit there and say, okay, they handled this team like this. So it's not an exact science, but I take my eyes over anything I see in a magazine or publication or anything saying this team's this. Yeah. I'll tell you because looking at it. Like, I think someone said, wow, New Trier looks really good last night. And I was sitting there and finally I couldn't take it. I go, no, they don't. Yeah. He's like, what do you mean? I said, they don't look good. I said, they look sloppy. Yeah. I said, and I guarantee you, Coach Harala will say to me, they look sloppy. Yeah. And after the game, he said, we were a little sloppy. And I said, yeah. I said, but that's to be expected. Right. Now they have a game tomorrow night, which I'll be going to. And when we're saying, just to clarify, Thursday, we're talking Friday the 29th. So by the time anybody's listening to this, this game will be history. Right. Yeah, so you can see what I mean. We'll probably talk about it next week. Right. So they're going to St. X Louisville, which is, again, to mess with my mind more, I'm going to see St. X, New Trier, then New Trier next week. And then, so that'll be an interesting game. And that'll give us a little concept because St. Xavier out of Kentucky just beat Archbishop Moeller out of Ohio, which, was kind of our... No, Trinity beat Moeller. Oh, Trinity. Sorry. Right. And St. X beat Trinity yesterday. Yes, that big rivalry. And that's another team's there. Huge. Right. That's the rivalry in Kentucky. So. Right. That's 1 and 2. It's too many... right, but that's the St. X. Right. So, but the wonderful thing about it is for us, for fans, these are big season, early season, like it just kicked off with it's like it's the 5th round of a fight. These are the Titans in their area. Boom. Going against each other. Right there. I mean, the only thing that's not as far as states, New Trier Loyola is towards the end of the year. Cathedral Carmel, which I expect to be the 2 people standing the best this year, possibly. That needs to play out, but that's a big rivalry. That's the last game of the year. Yeah. But to see St. X Trinity, St. X Moeller, St. X, these are all Brother Rice DCC. These are all big ones. So I'll be seeing New Trier, St. X Louisville tomorrow. Yeah. And basically thinking to myself, okay, New Trier is not going to be able to go in and be that sloppy. Right. That early against this team because I think St. X at Louisville is super talented, and they've been playing. Yeah, I think they're pretty warmed up. They've had a few more games, right? So that's a tricky game. And then this weekend we have in Indianapolis. I don't have to leave. At Cathedral, we have Cathedral High School is hosting. I don't know, what are they calling it? Is it a I didn't get a sense of the title. Showcase, a jamboree? Yeah, I mean MICDS out of St. Louis, and is it St. Ignatius out of Ohio, and Upper Arlington. Upper Arlington out of Ohio, and then obviously Cathedral. They're all kind of playing like round robin, like it's a 2-day. Like I don't know if it has a name. Like we'll have to find out. Like anybody who's listening to this, like we'll end up talking about this because I'm actually going to Cathedral on Sunday to watch MICDS play Upper Arlington.
because that was just too tantalizing a game to miss. So
it's going to be they're getting a double barrel of Lax Records representation at that.
Yeah, so you definitely want to stay tuned for that for next week, because we'll obviously be talking about those games. I did kind of want, before we kind of talk about our the overarching big topic. I guess we call it the fun story of the week and I guess it's only fun for, maybe some people, because it's like anybody who was following lacrosse, remember the kid out of at Wheaton College, it was the big story because his head was too big. They couldn't find a helmet to fit his head. Well, like the story ended up cropping up in my Google alerts in the morning, and like I checked it, and it was like, it was almost the same exact headline where, Delaware's player's head too big, gets benched. And I was like, someone just picking this story up from like 2 months. I was like, this was in February. I literally thought, I was like, someone must be getting to this late. But I clicked on it anyway, and it turns out, no, it's a completely different story. And this one's, he's like a high school freshman, Billy Boyd, out of Cape Henlopen, out of Delaware. His head measures 25 inches around. And according to the story, the grown man's head is usually like 21 to 23. And we're talking like, this is a freshman in high school. And he can't play because he can't make a helmet big enough, like a regulation helmet. Like it was one of those, like I think the other kid, the Alex Chu from Wheaton, I think they said in high school, like they hodgepodge, like they took 2 helmets and made it one or something. It was like a crazy kind of like MacGyver-ish thing that they had done. I don't know if you saw this story, if you got a chance to read it, because I dropped it in the show notes, but it was one of those, like, I was like, this is kind of crazy. Like, what are the odds of getting this story twice in the same year, months apart?
It's actually the third time. Because Tohoka Nanticoke had the same thing when he wore the box helmet at IMG, and then in Albany they wouldn't let him wear it, so he cut 2 helmets in half and melded them together.
Yeah.
So there's where it started. So my thought when it happened the first time with the first boy, my thought was, well, who made Tohoka's helmet?
Yeah.
Why isn't there 10? Like, why didn't they make 10 of those helmets? Because if it happens to one, it could happen to another. So then it happened to that kid about 2 months ago, a month ago.
It was early February, give or take.
Okay. Why didn't they make 4?
Yeah.
Because if it happened again, they're like, big people.
They had a quote from, I guess, it was Roland LaRose from the vice president of Cascade Maverick, and they said that, I guess, now they have an alternative manufacturing process. And the Chu kid from Wheaton, he did receive a custom helmet in February, so he's theoretically playing. Like, I haven't checked his career.
Legit.
So, like, I would have to think, like, it is possible now. I don't know. Being this is high school and the other 2 guys were college, you always kind of wonder, like, all right, what's the cost? Like, did the college pay for the other 2 helmets? Like, Albany probably was going to get him on the field. Like, that's, and when you're talking that level, like, the cost of that helmet probably wasn't much. It was like, hopefully Billy will be able to get on the field, like, since they can make a helmet, because you'd really hate to see, like, we're trying to grow the game and get the sport bigger, no pun intended, but one of those, like, you'd hate to see, like, you don't want a kid to give it up just because, like, well, I can't find a helmet that fits, so I guess I'll go play basketball or soccer or someplace where that stuff you don't run into that stuff. But that was just one of those fun stories of the week that comes across my desk every now and then. I was like, well, that's different. Like, it's just very odd that it happens multiple times in the same season.
Right.
Like,
well, you'd think someone like Cascade, though, would sit there and say, this poor kid, we don't want to make a kid not be able to play. We're going to make you a helmet and give it. I mean, that's great publicity. You can't pay for it.
This is an easy corporate write-off. Like, we are going to donate this helmet to Cape Henlopen, and you breed goodwill, and you probably have a fan for life.
Right, exactly. So, and I'm assuming, knowing how the lacrosse world works, that they do that. People in the lacrosse world, it's not all about money.
Right.
They do it for goodwill. These aren't Fortune 500 companies that all care about the bottom line. Everyone's in this together. It's all about growing this to be good. So I would assume they'll step up, or somehow it'll get resolved and everything will be taken care of.
And I'll link to that story for anybody who wants to read it, and I'll in the show notes and everything. It's one of those, like, I hope, like, unfortunately, one of the things usually in high school reporting is a lot of stories don't get follow up, because usually, like, the original story gets the headline, and then, but what the result is, usually it's not quite as flashy, so people made out. So, like, I'm actually going to try to follow that to see if hopefully we'll find out if Billy actually gets on the field, because Cape Henlopen, like, they're a good program out of Delaware too. Like, it's not just a nothing school. Like, they have history there. So I have to believe he will get on the field. Maybe not as a freshman, but he will
Right,
at least he will at least get a helmet.
That would be a big story too. That he's making the team as being on varsity as a freshman. I mean, that's also a big story.
Well, this one didn't have a picture of him, but I had to think, I was like, if his head's that big, it's like, how big is this kid as a freshman? Right. Like,
I'm assuming he's just huge.
Yeah,
like a football player playing lacrosse.
Yeah, so I'm like, it's always when I was like, it's like, I guess we won't know until he gets on the field how good he is, but probably not the way he would like to make the news. But,
sure.
Then again, they always say no. There's no such thing as bad publicity. Like
right. Well,
I know his name now. I probably wouldn't have otherwise. So.
Right. Well, I wish him the best because as for an awkward kid, it might feel awkward for a kid.
Oh yeah, and obviously we've been in high school. We know it can be rough to be different.
Right. Now the thing is, I'm guessing if his head's that big, he's a big kid. I don't think anyone's going to be teasing him. That's probably like the wrong idea.
Yeah.
But anyway, we hope it works out for him, and we hope it's great. And I don't want to think like we're making fun of him. We're just
no.
It's just a funny story, and it's a good story, and
interesting story of the week. And I was like, and hopefully, if nothing else, like it draws a little bit of attention, so the kid does get. Because I always wondered like if the stories don't get written, does anything actually happen?
Right.
Like only when they make the news. And this was this was the local newspaper in Delaware. It's like sometimes you put a little pressure on companies, or you give it a little bit more attention. Things tend to happen. So
I agree.
It's one of those
we're doing our part. We're doing our part to try to get him a helmet.
We definitely want this kid to be able to play. Regardless of his skill level. Like he wants to play. He wants to play lacrosse. Like we should be encouraging anybody who wants to play the sport to play. Let's reduce the amount of barriers.
Right.
Speaking of barriers, the big story of the week, and this kind of came across my Twitter feed earlier this week, and it's going to be an interesting one because I guess the NCAA, and this was first reported by U.S. Lacrosse, at least where I saw it, is that they're recruiting, or possible new legislation to change the recruiting timeline that will permit phone calls, emails, and text messaging to begin June 15th. Which is basically the end of a sophomore season. And before it, not say before, like generally most of the sports, and I know that, and this does exclude kind of the high revenue sports, football, men's and women's basketball, it excludes ice hockey too.
That's the weird thing it excludes is ice hockey.
Yeah. In baseball, it says it has an added amendment that's also excluded. And it said the Atlantic Coast Conference submitted a proposal that would exempt lacrosse and keep September 1 as the initial date of contact. So, I can't believe anybody listening to this wouldn't know, but just for context, it was last year, I forget when it actually went into effect. Basically, all the coaches got together and they passed this amendment that was saying, no contact until September 1st of the junior season. And for the most part, football and basketball, the major sports, that's what it is. You still get the kids that make the commitment. And anybody listening to this was like, I did do air quotes.
Air quotes.
Because it's a verbal commitment. And I think that's, I guess I don't see it as much in lacrosse. In football, we made it a little bit more clear there was a verbal commitment and then you signed. So the commitment is basically I am going to, I can commit, I have 4 years eligibility left. I can commit to Ohio State.
They're not committing to you.
Yeah, they're not committing to me. And so it's one of those for me, it was interesting because it was basically all the coaches were kind of like, you know what, we need to stop this. It's getting out of hand. Brendan O'Neill was committing as an 8th grader. Joey Epstein was the previous earliest one where he committed during his freshman season at Landon. It's one of those, I think they finally saw, we need to do something. And now with this, the NCAA could basically be I'm pretty sure it hasn't been a year. I can't remember when that went into effect. Is it over a year now?
Yeah, because I know kids who are now sophomores who as 8th graders were being talked to.
Yeah. And so
then it went in as freshmen. So that was, now they're sophomores. So it was, that last year was for sure the whole deal. Because I remember this summer or this November when the fall season goes on, everyone's the coaches could actually walk up to the kid at the fall tournaments and say, is that kid a junior? And then they could walk over to him.
Yeah.
So I know that's the 1 year.
And it seemed like the college coaches, they quoted a couple of the women's coaches who I don't have their names in front of me right now, but I'll link to the article as well. But they, most of the coaches seem to be against it because I guess the way it I say most. The ones that were quoted were against it. I'm sure, like any other thing, there's people on both sides. But it ended up being one of those things where like they feel like I guess their summer will be crazy again because then they will. And it made me laugh a little bit because you don't know what the other colleges are doing. And that's really for me what it came down to. It's like, you really could choose not to do it. But like, we're just going to keep September 1st. Because I mean, to be honest, like it really, like, I don't think it was an NCAA rule. It's like, it's kind of like an agreed upon gentleman's agreement kind of situation. And it's always like, you can choose not to participate or choose not to do it. Like, we're just going to keep September 1st. But then a lot of coaches were like, they kind of taken their summer away. Like, they were like, we're going back to the way it was. And I see their point on that. Like, but I put it out to Twitter, and I thought it was interesting because I really wasn't sure what to expect. Like, it was one of those, like, how do people feel about that? And especially since my audience is high school, I figured they would probably have opinions on it. And so going to pull a couple that got back to me. Alonzo Lacrosse said they thought it would be a good move. It's very minor to move up from September in terms of the calendar, but major in that it fits students and family schedules better. Summer is a good time to have contact. When they aren't in school, September students are busy getting back into the swing of school. So I thought that was a pretty good point, considering it's like, yeah, it's a little bit better for the students because they have a little bit more time. Maybe they can go visit some of the schools that they're interested in, that they know are interested in them. Whereas, in September when colleges are starting to talk to them, they're back in school. So it's a little bit busier. And then, Cuthbertson, I'm going to butcher that, I'm sorry. CHS Cavs Lax said they also, I think they need to wait to see how the next few years play out. The first year is going to be hectic. Second should be better. Don't jump the gun just yet. And I took that as like, basically don't change the rule.
Right.
Like, we don't even really know how the rule that was in place really is going to impact things overall. Like we haven't had enough data to really know how it's affecting things overall. And then Coach Zach Burke, who is at Westlake in Texas and was a guest on the show a few episodes ago, he kind of agreed. He's like, the kids need to meet the coaches in person and get on campus in the summer. So from the responses that I got, it seemed most people were in favor of moving this rule up, which from the college coaches that were quoted in the article is not the way. So it was like looking at and I think I'd made the comments like, oh, it seems to be the push and pull between what works better for the kids and parents versus what works better for the coaches and the NCAA. And my little snarky comment was like, I wonder who's going to win in that battle. I'm sure you have an opinion on this, so I really and we haven't talked about it, so I really have no idea where you fall on this. So I'm curious to hear.
Well, I think you probably answered when you said parents and one thing fall one way, coaches. I'm a parent.
Yeah.
My kid's going to be a junior next year. I will tell you, I thought the September date was arbitrary. I thought it made no sense to me because who's thinking about lacrosse, honest to God, in September?
Well, keep in mind, 1st, too, that's a lot of like football, basketball. Like that's
sure,
usually what the majors do, and that's...
I'm only thinking my prism is all lacrosse. So what I think is great about this move is, now the question I want to ask, what were the schools of the coaches? Did they put what schools they were from? Were they West Coast schools or were they Midwest schools? I can't imagine the East Coast schools complaining because I will tell you this, starting in June to probably the end of August, the lacrosse world lives on the East Coast.
Yes.
I will be
usually in the Baltimore area.
I will be in the Baltimore area for a month with my son. And when you're standing on the sideline and you're seeing 70, 80 college coaches there with clipboards.
Yep.
Last year in this thing, they couldn't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
They would just look, they'd write down a number. Now, think about the kids for a second, that they're busting their butt, working their butt off, seeing coaches look at them. They don't know. There's no feedback. So it's angst. I mean, I've seen it. I was talking with kids and they're like, do you think I played well enough? Do you think this? Do you think, I just wish I could talk to them.
Yeah.
Well, now they'll be able to talk to them. They could find out right then. Like, a coach might walk over to their coach and say, hey, I'd like to say hi to Johnny.
Yeah.
Hey, you looked good, this and that. I'm going to watch your next game. You could reach back and forth. So I think that's a good thing. And again, which Alonzo said was the summer is the best time. So being out east. So if a school like Tufts, D3, but comes up and says,
Yeah.
hey, we're interested in you. Come and take a look at our place. They could drive from where they are
Yeah.
on that trip and say, I'll take 2 days out of my way. Again, I'll drive anywhere, but I'll take 2 days over to go check out Tufts. And then I'm back on Friday for the start of another tournament. Because anyone who's listening to this, odds are you've got a kid or you're a kid and you know what your summer is like. If you're not playing out east, well, then I don't know. I just know this. If you're trying to go to college, odds are you're out east.
Yeah.
So I think it goes hand in hand. I think it works nicely. I think it takes a lot of the mystery out of it. It takes a lot of the angst out of it. It gives you immediate feedback. There's a lot of people who think they've got a D1 kid on their hands.
Well, yeah.
You're going to know right then. Now, even if they like you, they might say, I'm going to look at 15 other kids here, but you're on our list.
Right.
But the whole joke was you're not a D1 player if D1 coaches aren't calling you. If you're getting all letters from D3, D2 and no D1, you're D2, D3. Now, again, not knocking the other divisions at all. I think actually for most kids, I would say you're better off doing a D2 or D3 because there is no huge money payoff by playing D1, and it is so time consuming.
Right. You
have to love the sport to play D1.
You're kind of a professional athlete in Division I athletics.
Right. So unless you think it's going to be the greatest thing in the world, and that's what you live for, that's great. But if you want to experience college, now granted, if you could walk out of D1 and get a $20 million shoe deal, like basketball or football or even baseball, then you do it. But there's no huge money payoff. So to make your choice to where you want to go and to find out immediately, or to find out just to talk to the guy and say, hey, I was impressed by the coach, or I wasn't that impressed by the coach.
Yeah.
To find out in the summer when you are concentrating on college.
Yeah.
And it starts from your freshman year. It starts from 8th grade. When you see 8th graders go there, freshmen go. Those coaches are watching those kids. Not as much, but you still see coaches on the sideline writing it down, walking up to a coach and saying, who is that kid, and writing it down. So as a parent and as the father of a player who would hope to be recruited, I think September I think having it in June works easier. It's more convenient. I don't really care about the NCAA or the coaches.
Right.
Here, if you're saying, oh, we don't get our summer, sorry, you're a coach. That's your job.
Yeah.
Not all of us have summers. One person's working has a summer break.
Right. Well,
except me, of course. But.
I actually think I fall a little bit on the other side of this because I look at them like, all right, and keep in mind, like I started my reporting career covering football, and football is like none of the kids in football are hurting for scholarships as far as there's full rides in that sport, and like there's the same pressure. Like the kids, football is a full time. Like if you're playing football and you're going D1, you are a football player. You probably are not playing another sport because once football season ends, you're getting ready for the combine, and the combines are where you get your numbers and it is a full time. Like I've been there, and I'm sure it's only gotten worse since I've stopped covering it. But they're not hurting as far as getting recruited, and they can't be contacted until September 1 of their junior year. And I will say it right now, I would guarantee that if there's a college lacrosse coach that is out there and they see a kid during the summer and he's just finished his sophomore year, he may not be able to talk to him, but he can talk to his high school coach.
Yeah.
He can talk to his club coach. And I've been in the room, not with lacrosse, but with football, when a college coach has been in there and the coach just happens to call Johnny, be like, hey, can you come down to the office? I need you to grab something. Oh, Coach Meyer from Ohio State just happened to be here. Like, maybe you want to say hello. There's ways around that for certain kids.
That stuff works. Yeah, there is. Again, but that's for the top.
And it wasn't Urban Meyer. I'm not trying to.
Right.
No one at me. No, there's no recruiting violation. I'm just throwing a name out there.
No, that stuff does work.
But so I look at it from that way, and I'm like, is it? Yes, it's more convenient for parents and for kids to be able to go and visit and drive the Tufts. But I also look at it this way. I'm like, if you're taking it off the table entirely, for me, I look at them like, because I've talked to so many kids, and I actually, not sports related, but I read an article the other day about like how teenagers are more anxious and depressed now than ever before.
Yes.
And a lot of it, social media, and the way it's like the constant contact, and kids get bullied now. Like, at least when I got bullied in high school, when I left school, I got to leave it alone. Like, now it can go on digitally from outside of school hours. So like, I look at it from another perspective, like, all right, if you're just taking recruiting off the table for your entire sophomore year, like, you don't even have to worry about it. Like, if you have a bad game as a sophomore, which you were young, you're still developing. If you have a bad game, you don't even really have to worry about it, because like, all right, I'm going to have other opportunities. Like, I'm going to have the fall of my junior year to show coaches what I can do. I'm going to have a whole new highlight reel. And then you have, your high school season in your junior year. Like, you have other opportunities. Whereas, I think when the kids are getting recruited younger, there is more pressure, because those games matter more. Because even though, yes, everybody's on the East Coast, like college, we've talked before, like, not like these budgets are, they don't have a football budget. Like, these coaches are picking and choosing what events to go to now, like, Hopkins and Maryland and Towson and a lot of those schools that are located within 20 miles of St. Paul's and Towson and the areas where a lot of these tournaments have, like, it's not really an issue for them. They can bring 5 coaches because it's literally a drive. Some of them probably live a few miles from the schools. So it's a little bit different. So I think, like, I'm just wondering, like, why is it such a bad thing to completely take the recruiting thing off the table for a kid of his sophomore year and let it happen in the fall? And then, like, yeah, you can't go visit the college, but then again, when the colleges start contacting you in September, and then in October, you're starting to see, like, all right, these are the colleges you're interested in. So you kind of get to take your time and kind of narrow it down a little bit too, and be like, all right, these are the ones that I'm interested in. You get to, like, I feel like, wouldn't you get to do a little bit more research on what may be best for you? And you're kind of taking some of that off the table. Because I guess I worry, like, if the coaches can contact them in summer, are we going to go back to the way it was before, where, oh, Johns Hopkins, they're talking to me, I went and visited the campus, I'm just going to commit because I know they're talking to like 15 other kids, and I want to make sure I get the spot before all those guys.
Well,
like, I'm asking, like,
that's the same. But that's the same. I think that thing happens in September, or
yeah.
It's not like it's a year difference. It's a few months back, and it's coinciding with the actual summer tour. Now, in September, there's also the fall tour, and I prefer, now again, being a selfish father, I prefer the fall season.
Yeah.
The funny season, as they like to call it, because, well, I like it because I have a small kid.
Yeah.
And usually in the fall tournaments, there's no football players there. Now, and it makes a difference. I'm sorry.
Well, when you do the eye test.
Right. So you have less football, big, huge, because they grab the eye. Yeah. I mean, you see a big, huge kid, you're drawn to him. You don't look at the kid who's 5'4",
right,
or 5'3". So there's my selfishness talking about my own son. I don't not even saying that he's getting recruited or anything, but I just like to go there. So so I look at it either way. Doesn't matter to me. I don't have a child that people are going to be banging down the door. I do, however, have friends who have children who coaches are going to bang down their door. And I know that they would like to get this started and perhaps over with sooner than later.
See, but that's what worries me. Because
it's going to happen anyway. Kids have been worried about this since they've been in 8th grade. I mean, there's one child I'm speaking of who was called by Ohio State in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Then the rule came in, and it was radio silence.
Yeah.
So he's been sitting there since 8th grade thinking, does Ohio State still want me? Now he will be a junior.
Yeah.
Going when September 1st comes. He's a sophomore right now. So he's been sitting there like, okay, well, is that our team still going to like me? So that started because of that. But this is the whole thought process. When you're playing high school, I want to do this. You're sending a tape out. You're making tape. You're making a recording.
Right.
You're making a
YouTube clip.
Right. You're making your clips and whatever. I don't think the month difference makes a difference as far as angst. I think this takes angst off the table. And as a parent, it gives you that opportunity to say, okay, I've blocked out a month of my schedule to go out east.
Yeah.
Now for me, I drive, so
Right.
I'll be driving back through Ohio or what. And if I said, okay, here's Ohio Wesleyan was out there, which is a D3 school in Ohio, and
Yeah.
said, we're interested. I could drive to Ohio Wesleyan on the way back. You
Right.
could make it all on your schedule,
Yeah.
as opposed to now it becomes September 1st. If it's September 1st, they're not batting down the door for 98% of the players.
Right.
Okay. They're still waiting. And then they're going to wait till November when the silly season starts.
Yeah.
Well, then it's like, okay, I have to go look at you in December, January, February, March. Like it's a different world. It's a different season. It's a different time. So I see both ways. I just find the convenience for me as a parent and for my kid. And to be brutally honest, that's all I care about is me and my kid.
Yeah.
That's what this is for, is me and my kid.
Yeah.
So if that makes it easier for me and my kid, I'm for what makes it easier. And I'm speaking for the 100,000 fathers, mothers, and children.
Yeah.
That drive this sport and the economy of this sport.
Right.
And this first changing it to the junior year thing changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
It made it easier. It made kids relax, like where I know you're saying it.
Yeah.
It made kids have fun. The travel circuit wasn't as crazy. It got to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
But the difference in 4 months, I don't think makes the difference. So why not take it? You're only taking it back 4 months, right?
Yeah, he's taking it back 4 months, but I think when
you're
you
technically a junior when you get out of sophomore year.
You're still what, 15?
No, you're 16.
16. Well, I was on the young side, so
right.
I was still 15. But it's
I mean, you could be like you could have a April or August birthday.
I see your point, but it's like you're taking it back 4 months, but that's putting a lot more pressure on that summer session. Whereas now, since they can't be contacted, you're saying like the college coaches are kind of waiting till that October-November season, so the kids have more time. So they have, I mean, for some of the kids, again, they might not be playing on varsity teams as sophomores. They may still be, they may have been riding the bench. So like the amount of actual playing time, like they may just practice, like obviously I know they do with the club team and stuff like that, but they may not have really been playing towards their sophomore year. So then they're thrown into a summer season in which, as it stands right now, they really, again, there's less pressure. They don't have to worry about it because if they come out and they're a little rusty in their first couple games because they didn't really play, maybe they rode the bench as a sophomore. And so but now if you change it back, it's only moving it back 4 months, but all of a sudden I have to play well in this tournament because there's a sideline full of college coaches, and if I screw up, I'm screwing up my chance to go D1 kind of thing. Whereas if it's off the table, be like, well, I can take, you can play. And
they're still there watching, though.
And then they're there watching, but then, those coaches also know, and it's, they know, well, I'm looking at a young kid. I'm looking at a sophomore. Let me see him in November. What's the improvement between now and November then? And then, and I think you get a little bit more time to, for the kids to kind of, and, I don't think there's really anything wrong with having a little bit more time to make a decision, a more educated decision. And I understand the perspective of, we want to get it over with, but I heard that from a lot of kids for many, many years. And a lot of them didn't really the recruiting process. It wasn't fun for them. They're I just wanted it. I just wanted it over with so many times because they were and so many kids told me I committed because everybody else was committing.
That's true.
And I felt like if I didn't do it, I wasn't going to get the spot. And for me, I'm it's a horrible reason to commit to a school because you don't really know if you want to go there. You may not have had the ability to visit. You may not have had the ability, you may not know. And in lacrosse, we see so many kids develop late.
Oh, yeah.
That, then it was taking a lot, kid may have been Division I, you think obviously Pat Spencer's a bad example, but a kid like Pat, someone could grow into a talent of maybe not his caliber, but a Division I player that could have an impact. But it may not happen till his, junior or senior season. But in the old rule, like, well, those recruiting rosters are done. Like, there's no Division I schools have a spot open at that point.
That goes to a few different things. It goes back to what I've always said. There are more Division I players than there are Division I teams.
Yes.
But here's the other aspect. Now, you're dealing with kids and players and parents and coaches. When you were dealing with them was more from the East Coast. Okay?
No, actually, a lot of the stuff that I talked to, like I remember talking to kids out of Minnesota. I talked to kids from Ohio. Like I used to see, because obviously, as you mentioned, everybody lives on the East Coast for 3 months out of the year in recruiting tournaments, and I tended to focus more on the kids that came long distances. Like I remember talking to, and I always forget the kid's name, but he went to Trinity in Kentucky, and he was one of the good Brad Lott, face-off kid. And like I remember talking to his dad. We were standing there. It was at a Warrior 40 event. Like that was an event that we ran at when I was at ESPN. And he was trying out. He was like, "Yeah, we're going here, 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 and here, and we're fitting in a college visit, and we're doing this." And he's like, basically, we won't be home for like 2-3 weeks. He's like, because there's nothing in Kentucky for us to do during this time of year.
It's true.
Like, he was like, so they were doing it. He was like, and we need to get it. Like we want it done. And that was a little bit different because I think he was heading into a senior year, so he was a little bit. You say late. But you got to keep in mind context at the time. Like, that's really when decisions should be getting made. Like,
I agree.
That was kind of the more normal time frame from the sport that I was coming in football. But yet in lacrosse, it was like, I'm so far behind. I'm never going to get a spot. Well, it was
because you had to jump first in lacrosse. You had to take the risk on a kid because there were only so many schools that can get those kids. So they had to fight to get them. Yeah. Well, now there's more teams.
A few more.
There's more options.
Yeah.
Well, but I think now the D2 and D3 levels are becoming more. Parents aren't as hung up on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I even know this from football players. I've had friends whose kids were football players, and my kid's going D1, and they're like, oh, my kid's going to go to DePaul now. Another one was going to Denison, and it's the same thing. So it changed. So now I think parents are being more educated. Where I'd like to say, if they're pulling the cream of the crop in June, okay, it sort of clears the field for the kids who might have a chance to shine and then still be able to get contacted. Okay, this kid's gone, this kid's gone, this kid's gone. Now this kid's going to get looked at because they know these kids were taken out of the picture. So that might mean the kid who was recruited in June, who now is committed, air quotes, because that changes too, might not show up in July or at the early August one. And that can give a kid more shots and get the answer before. So there is no perfect answer because, again, I've heard from coaches about kids who are freshmen.
Yeah.
It always gets back to them.
Right.
There are certain rules where a coach could call a coach could call a coach and inquire about it. But can't give anything or make a text or a call. It's all the weird stuff.
Right.
But there's always gray areas. So the great kids are going to know they're great. This is, I think, what I'm looking at is the kid who's a tweener, who doesn't know where he fits. He thinks he might be this, and you get that answer right away, knowing, I'm not D1. I'm not.
See, but I think the later helps that tweener because it lets him develop. If he's between, and again, I almost hate saying like D1, D3 because it feels like we're like D1 is the dream. When I'm much more of a believer, like go where you fit.
100%.
Forget about lacrosse and find out where you fit because if you're not happy at school, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
But not everyone's like that, and I have to talk people off the ledge so much. In the last 2 weeks, I went and my kid's going D1, and I keep asking him. I'm like, why?
If he's miserable there, it doesn't matter what.
But I asked I've said to the parents, I'm like, and I don't want to put down any school,
right?
But I'm like, okay, so your son was offered a D1 scholarship, or again, I like when they tell me the scholarship. I'm like, you're not sniffing a dime. I mean, maybe 5 Gs, but I go, so your kid's going to go to that school, which sure, it's D1 lacrosse. Mm-hmm. I go, tell me in 10 years when he's doing well and he's got his D1 scholarship to the schools. Or I always like to use Tufts because I literally think Tufts is probably the greatest school in the world. I think it's just up there.
Yeah.
Williams, Tufts, put them up against anybody.
Yep.
I'm talking Harvard, Princeton, Stanford. You give me.
You can look at the alumni list at Tufts.
Right. Or you can go to Williams, or you can go to Tufts. What one do you think is going to solve your child's problem in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
This 4 years of lacrosse at D1 or D3 school at Tufts or Williams or Amherst or Salisbury or, Swarthmore.
Yeah.
Or, I can go any of the NESCAC schools. Now, if you look at a lot of these great kids from Long Island, they turn down D1 schools.
Yeah.
If it's not Ivy League, they don't look. Okay, it's not Ivy League. Let's go to NESCAC.
Yeah.
I promise you, there are tons of D1 players in the NESCAC.
Oh, yeah.
Tons. I would love to see a jamboree of D1, D2, D3 teams go and play.
Yeah.
Because I am sure that the top 4 teams in D3 could put a good run against some of these teams.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they could beat them.
Yeah.
So I think focusing on D1 is crazy.
Yeah.
So, unless you can get a full ride.
Right.
Like if you said full ride, boom, changes the whole game.
We're not going to see that player in our lifetime.
But that was,
if Brennan O'Neill, I don't know what the situation, but if Brennan O'Neill didn't get a scholarship, full ride, we're not going to see that. But I guess to my point was for that tweener kid that, is between going D1, D3, I think taking those 4 months off the table and letting it be in November, that could be the difference between getting contact from maybe D1 schools where he may want to go versus be like, well, now all the D1 recruiting classes are filled because they got all taken by the kids in the summer, but he's a little bit of a late bloomer. He's like, oh, I really didn't develop till, fall my junior year, but all those spots are gone. So I think for the tweeners, I think it can help them, yes, I know there's immediate feedback and it's just kind of the culture we live in now where just that you have to have that immediate, shock to the system. But, I think it's there's nothing wrong with having those few extra months. And I'm like, and again, I guess I don't consider myself siding with the NCAA or the college coaches. I feel I'm trying to advocate more for the kids and be give them more time to make the decision. And I understand where you're coming from, the travel and it's easier. But I also think well, if you take it to November, maybe you don't get to travel until summer after your junior year, and then you have a lot more time to weigh your options and make decisions. And then you have a lot more information by that time, because then by that time the list of schools. Now, granted, I know there's going to be you're always going to get kids to commit, and they've never even set foot on the campus. There's probably a kid here that I want to go to Syracuse, I want to go to Hopkins, I want to go to Maryland. Does not matter. And they'll just be we just, maybe they don't even go to visit. But I guess I've talked to enough kids over the years to know, and many different sports to know, it's a slippery slope. And once, you start pushing it back, I'm all right, well, then why don't we just move it back 4 more months and we let, fall the sophomore year? Because what's 4 more months? But and then that way they can, during that fall, October of their sophomore year, coaches can talk to them.
Personally here, if you want to know my personal, I would like it moved to June of their going into their senior year. Because again, as a father of a late bloomer, I was a late bloomer. I didn't grow until I was 18.
Right.
To give those kids a chance. Again, not saying my son's going to be it, but he's small.
Yeah.
He will be big. I'm not small. I was 5'4" when I was 16. I sat on a pillow to drive a car. I'm 5'11" now and shrinking. My brothers are 6'1" and 6'2".
Yeah.
My son's going to grow.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen late.
Right. And so, and that's a good case. And I think that there's probably a happy medium that would never happen. And I'm not going to fix, NCAA or anything like that by any means. Right. But it's when it's I don't see anything wrong. If you made it junior for September 1st to junior, all right, college coaches, contact is open. But no offers can be made until June after your junior year, because I think at least then you would have like, all right, you can talk, so you can get info. Like basically, like September to June is your information gathering time. Like you can find out, like, all right, we know who's interested. I know who's all interested, but like none of the kids can make the decision until June. Like you'd end up with basically, well, signing day in football and has become like that basically one day, but most people don't realize like you don't actually have to sign that day. You can take a lot longer. Like it's just become a national holiday that, everybody makes a decision that day. And I think if you did that in something in lacrosse where it's like, all right, June 1st is when, or, we'll just take June 15th since that's a proposed date for this one. Like June 15th is when the first kind of the offers can come in. You'd end up getting something along that line. Like, I mean, Inside Lacrosse might hate it because they might not get any sleep for the next week because of all the offers and commitments that would be coming in at that point. But, I think by that point, like you might see less of the, I went here for a year, I hated it, so I'm transferring to a D2 or D3 school where, I thought about it.
And that happens a ton.
And that's not going to stop. Like you're always going to get kids that go away to college.
But I don't think that people know that enough.
Yeah.
That there are a ton of kids who leave after their first year because let's think if you're from Arizona and all of a sudden you're playing out east. When winter hits you, you go, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
I don't want this.
Right.
And they go back and they leave.
Yeah.
You might have been the big star on your high school team, and then you go to a D1 program and you're sitting on the bench, but you're working your butt off, and they leave. There is so much attrition that goes on to D1 programs.
Yeah.
Again, not bashing D1 programs. It's not for everyone, but it is for some people. And I just say, but I my tangent keeps going off here because of the parent thing. And now, as a parent, I have one aspect. As someone in lacrosse media, air quote thing. I mean, I did get a press pass at a couple places, so I guess I am journalist. I am right. So to talk to parents who come up to me, who have literally in the last 2 weeks, now you have to picture this. I sit alone in the stands. I go up into a corner. I have my iPhone. I have a notebook, and I'm like, things are falling apart. You know how I am. I'm not. It's not like I don't have a laptop. I have paper and paperweights, and then people come up and sit next to me, and they ask me, "Are you from Lax Records?" Yeah. And first of all, I'm like, wow, that's the craziest thing. Yeah. Like, so my son, this, and I say to every one of them something that I heard from a recruiting coach.
Yeah.
Does your son love lacrosse? Like, yeah. I go, does he wake up and practice? Like, no. I go, does he sleep with a stick? No. I said, when he comes home from school, is the first thing he does practice? They're like, no. I go, and you think he's a D1 player?
Yeah.
I said, because that's what life as a D1 player is.
Yeah.
You wait. It's lacrosse first, then school.
Yeah.
No social life. No this. So if your kid
Fortnite.
Right. If your kid likes to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning playing Fortnite every night with his buddies, say goodbye to that.
Yeah.
Because so now think of it from that prism of D1.
Yeah.
And there are kids who literally love the sport. That walk around with the stick in their hand 24/7, and you go, that's a D1 kid.
Yeah.
You could see the D1 kids before they're playing.
Yeah.
You go to any tournament and you see the kids screwing around, laying down, talking on their phones, and you see the kid with the stick walking around twirling it, and you go, I got to watch that kid at the next game.
Yeah.
Because he's not doing what the other ones do.
Yeah.
So there's that whole aspect of it as a parent, and then as talking to parents, and the whole recruiting process, and how we're not even getting into the clubs, how the clubs deal with it against high school coaches. I think the least dirty part of it is this 4-month change.
Yeah.
I think there's so much more that could be discussed and litigated and done. But that's why I don't find this to be a big deal, where I find it is more of a help. Because if this summer some school comes up to my son and says, hey, we'd be interested in you, I'm getting in the car with him after that tournament and driving to that school.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if everyone's like me, but that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Let's check it out. Let's get all the information.
Yeah.
Because we're out there. I don't want to hear it when I'm back in Indiana and someone says, oh, would you like to see this school in Maine? And I'd be like, wait, I was just out there.
Yeah.
I could have, now I got to do this. So there's the convenience.
Yeah.
So, and again, there's no right or wrong answer.
Right, and everything is up to the individual player, the parents, and how they react. I mean,
Right.
no two kids are alike. One, like you said, one kid, he may eat, live, and breathe lacrosse, and there's nothing else. Like if they're not coming home to play Fortnite, they're coming home from practice and they're hitting the wall. Like
Right.
it's like they're those kids and so they may be ready to make that decision June 15th to be like, I know what I want to do. I have no
Right.
doubt. And then there's other kids, like we talked about, like they're tween, they're not sure, and they would like more time. So I'd really be curious to hear what everybody else thinks. So, if you're on listen to this through your podcast player, you can find us on Twitter or Instagram, and we'll make sure, I'm at Lax Records on Instagram and Twitter. And then Mike is at MFWCHI on Twitter. And I'll let him kind of give his email and his spiel as we usually do. But if you're watching this on YouTube, because we actually do this video on YouTube now, you can leave some comments below, because I'd really be curious, because I have a feeling this is one of those things, like, I'm going to be curious what happens, because the one question the article did not give to me that I had a question about was, like, who's actually pushing this? Because most things in NCAA are driven by the revenue sports, driven by money. And football, basketball are taken out of it. Baseball is excluded. So I'm like, all right, if it's not them, why? I was like, who's driving this? Like, who's? And obviously, the coaches that he interviewed didn't seem like they were the ones driving it. So for me, I'm like, all right, who's? NCAA just came out and randomly said they want to move the date up. Like, it seemed.
What sport does it help the most or hurt the most?
Yeah, and
I mean, it can't. There's no way the NCAA is making something to make recruiting for lacrosse. Like, they're thinking from a lacrosse standpoint. I could never, if they were thinking from a lacrosse standpoint ever, there'd be more lacrosse on TV.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be recruiting.
Yeah. So that was the one question that I have. It's still unanswered. Like, I'm really not sure, like, what the driver is behind this. So, like, I'm curious to see how this kind of goes. Because if it's not the major revenue sports, then what is it? And obviously it doesn't seem to be lacrosse unless there's a contingent of coaches behind the scenes that just are doing it.
Lacrosse coach has that much pull to make the NCAA do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. Some lacrosse coaches going to hey, literally, I don't think Urban Meyer or Nick Saban could get the NCAA to do anything. Or Bobby Knight, they kicked them out. There is not a lacrosse coach in the history of the world that could say, hey, we should change this. Yeah. I mean, so you're right. Like, who benefits?
Yeah.
What? Like, why did it happen? Like,
we're taking ice hockey. I'm like, is this women's volleyball? Like, it's like, really, what sport is the driving force behind it that it's just like enough to, but we'll see. I mean, I think they said they were, don't have the date the council meets April 17th and 19th, so we're to vote on it. So we're not talking, we're a month less than that, right? Yeah, we're less than a month away from that. So that's going to be interesting to watch and see how this plays out, and to see how the lacrosse community on both sides, because I think it's a little, I mean, obviously we don't necessarily agree on what side of it to fall on, even though I think we're both on the same side of we're both advocating for the same people, just on two different sides. So I'm like, that kind of shows you how complicated this whole thing is. So I will be curious to see how that plays out. So I guess we'll be probably revisiting this in late April.
I would like to put a poll out there. I'd like to see what travel coaches think.
That's another aspect we didn't even get into. So
well, that's a big one. That's a big one.
So if you're a club coach, listen to this, definitely let us know. Like, reach out to us, Michael. Like, let me let you do the official, so you can let everybody know where to find you online.
Oh, okay. You could email me at mward@laxrecords.com, or I'm on Twitter, like Mike said, at MFWCHI.
And then, like I said, I'm at Lax Records on Twitter and Instagram, same on Facebook. So we'd love to hear from everybody to kind of see what you guys think on this, because on any of the topics that we discussed today. But I have a feeling this is probably the one that most people would probably have. I'm sure people have opinions on this, and I'm really curious to see what those thoughts are, because, I mean, most of the people that we read on Twitter, like, they seem to be kind of in favor of change, but that was a small amount of the total lacrosse community. So we'll be curious to see. So everybody, if you're listening to this on your podcast player, make sure try to leave us a review in iTunes. That really is supposed to help the show, at least so I'm told. Like we don't have any reviews yet, but we'd love to hear it, positive or negative. Negative always helps us change on what we might do. Positive, just kind of nice. Be a nice ego boost. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. So everybody, until next week.
See ya.